I can still feel the sting in my chest from the moment he pushed that document across the desk. No eye contact, no explanation, just a quiet, deliberate shove that said everything he thought of me without using a single word. 7 years of holding that place together, of absorbing pressure that would have crushed anyone else, reduced to a footnote in one silent exchange. I walked out of that office carrying more rage than I knew how to contain, and one truth he never imagined I possessed. I didn't realize how close I was to breaking until the morning everything finally snapped. For 7 years, I arrived before the lights were fully on, cleaned up whatever chaos had been left in my wake, and quietly salvaged projects my boss, Miles Thatcher, was too busy posturing over to truly understand. I was never a hero, just the one who stepped in when things fell apart. And that, I learned too late, was my greatest mistake. I believed quiet competence would eventually matter in a place that only rewarded volume and ego. That day began like every other. I walked in with my usual coffee, already bracing myself for another round of damage control, but the office felt wrong. Too still, the kind of silence that presses against your skin and tells you something has already happened. People glanced at me, then looked away a beat too quickly. That should have warned me. Miles's assistant told me he wanted to see me immediately, her voice tight, rehearsed, like she was delivering bad news she didn't want attached to her name. I walked down the same hallway I'd walked thousands of times, but every step felt heavier, slower. Miles sat behind his glass desk, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up, didn't offer a greeting. He just tilted his chin toward the chair, then slid a folder across the polished surface. No context, no courtesy. In that single motion, I felt the first fracture spread through something I'd held together for years. I opened the folder, expecting updates, maybe a shift in scope, possibly even acknowledgement for the crisis I'd fixed the night before. Instead, I saw reassignment. I blinked, read it again, felt heat climb my spine. My title was gone, my responsibilities struck through, and centered beneath it all, as if it were some kind of reward, was a single line. Effective immediately, Hannah will transition into workflow support under Junior Innovation Lead Tyler Marks. Tyler, 24 years old, hired because his uncle played golf with the board. The same Tyler who once asked if supply chain visibility meant turning on more lights. I stared at Miles, waiting for him to smile, to explain, to admit this was some kind of joke. He leaned back instead, a faint smirk tugging at his mouth, and called it a strategic restructuring, said I'd be helping Tyler ramp up. Helping, ramping up, demoted to assisting someone who couldn't send a complete email without asking where attachments went. Something deep inside me finally shifted. Years of pressure, years of swallowing disrespect, beginning to split open. I had held departments together while Miles paraded credit, built trust with clients while he butchered metrics, given this company every ounce of stability it had. And now I was reporting to Tyler because Miles wanted someone younger, shinier, easier to shape. I didn't argue, I didn't plead, I didn't cry. I closed the folder and placed it back on his desk. That was the last moment he ever believed I was someone he could break, because something inside me had already started to wake. I left his office feeling like my bones were humming. I'd endured impossible deadlines, midnight emergencies, half-finished disasters dropped on me with a casual "fix this," but nothing compared to being told I'd answer to someone who still typed LOL in professional emails. I wasn't angry yet. Shock comes first. But by the time I reached my desk, humiliation settled over me like a coat I couldn't remove. People were watching, pretending not to, but absolutely watching. You learn that silence after enough years in corporate spaces. The mix of curiosity, pity, and relief that it wasn't them. Eyes darted away. A whisper drifted from the break room. Then came the final insult. Tyler appeared at my desk, shirt rumpled, hair uncombed, sneakers squeaking against the carpet. He lifted his hand in a half-wave, half-high-five, then dropped it, unsure. "Hey, Hannah," he said, voice cracking with nervous excitement. "Miles told me the news." I said nothing. He shifted. So, I guess you'll be showing me, like, everything? Everything. Years of systems, vendor logs, escalation chains, budgets, workflows, client expectations. A machine I'd built piece by piece from chaos. And he expected the keys like this was a class assignment? I kept my voice level. What exactly did Miles tell you I'd be doing? His face lit up with pride. That I'd train him to take over my department. Not support it, take it over. My jaw tightened, then relaxed. When do you want to start? He shrugged. Now, I guess. I grabbed my laptop and followed him into a dim conference room with flickering lights and a table too small for anything meaningful. He spun in his chair while I opened files, explaining the foundations, scheduling systems, vendor logs, escalation chains. 10 minutes in, his eyes glazed. This is a lot, he muttered. Yeah, I said, it is. He rubbed his neck. Why didn't Miles just put you in charge? You already know all this. The question landed harder than anything Miles had said. Because he could, I answered. 3 hours. 3 hours of compressing 7 years into fragments for someone who couldn't remember which tab he'd clicked moments earlier. He asked me to slow down, then asked if we could skip the boring parts. The boring parts were what kept the company standing. When I finally dismissed him, he stretched and said, "Thanks, Hannah. I know this is weird, but it'll work out," and gave me a thumbs up. A thumbs up. Watching him walk away, something inside me shifted. Painful, necessary, final. Miles hadn't demoted me because I failed. He did it because he assumed I'd accept it quietly. That was the last moment humiliation defined me. Beneath the shame, something powerful was rising. My breaking point was sharpening into an edge I'd never dared imagine. None of them had any idea what was coming. I drove home gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. No radio, no calls, just the sentence looping in my head. You'll be training Tyler to take over your department. I walked into my apartment, dropped my bag, and sat in the dark until the silence grew loud. That's when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name, Serena Vale. We'd met once at a logistics panel. She'd spoken without buzzwords, without pretense, sharp, intimidating. She'd told me, "You see things clearly." I never thought she'd remember. Her message was simple. "Hannah, are you free this week? I've been following your work. I'd like to talk." The next morning, we met for coffee by the river. Serena didn't waste time. She knew my work. Vendors talked. Clients talked. She slid her laptop toward me, a proposal, North Briggs expansion. She wanted me in leadership, authority, budget, a team, equity, real power. I felt my mind hesitate while my heart leapt. "Think about it," she said. "You deserve more than background noise." I told myself I needed time, but I was stalling. Loyalty has roots, even in poisoned ground. The next morning, I went back to the office and pretended nothing had changed. Answered emails, cleaned up Tyler's mistakes, stayed late, 3 nights in a row. Not by choice, but because disasters kept coming. A vendor invoice Miles approved without reading. A client escalation Tyler answered with a tone-deaf message that felt like a joke. A supply coordination spreadsheet overwritten because someone didn't understand shared files. None of it was my fault, but all of it became my responsibility. As always, the worst part wasn't the mess. It was realizing I'd been doing this for years without ever calling it what it was: survival. I wasn't building anything. I was holding broken pieces together while other people took bows. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. On Wednesday night, I stayed past 10, rewriting a shipment schedule Tyler had managed to delete while experimenting with shortcuts. The office was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, like they were exhausted too. I sat there staring at the glowing screen, hands cold, head pounding, thinking about Serena's words. You deserve a place where your work isn't treated like background noise. Background noise. That was exactly what I'd become here. A constant hum that kept everything running while the people in front pretended to matter. I was still staring at the mess when Miles barged in the next morning wearing one of his performative frowns. "Hannah, the board wants an updated status report," he announced as if I should know what he meant. "A report on what?" I asked. "Everything," he said. Operations, vendor delays, client satisfaction. Just whip something up. Whip something up, as if a full analysis of half the company's workflow was something I could throw together in an afternoon. The meeting's in 2 hours, he added, and I want it polished. I looked at him, waiting for the punchline, but there wasn't one. He truly believed I could read his mind, fix every mistake, and make it perfect before lunch, because that's what I'd always done. He had no idea what it cost me. I opened my laptop while he hovered behind me, pretending to supervise. "You need to move faster," he muttered. Faster. My pulse slammed. For a moment, I imagined turning around and telling him exactly who he was and what he'd done to me. But I didn't. I just breathed slowly and kept typing. As he walked away, my phone buzzed. A message from Serena checking in. "No rush, just want you to know the door is open. No pressure, no demands, no hovering, just respect." I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down. That message felt like a lifeline, and I wasn't ready to admit how much I needed it. That night, driving home, the truth finally hit me. Loyalty wasn't what was keeping me there anymore. Fear was. Fear of leaving, fear of starting over, fear that maybe Miles was right and I wasn't leadership material. But then I remembered the look in Serena's eyes, the kind that saw potential instead of utility, and for the first time, I wondered what my life might look like if I stopped surviving and started choosing myself. That question stayed with me long after the office lights disappeared in my rearview mirror. I didn't plan to quit that night. I didn't drive home thinking, "This is it." I didn't feel brave or bold or empowered. I felt exhausted, bone deep, tired, the kind that makes you forget who you were before you started shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. But something inside me finally slipped when I got home. I dropped my bag on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and stared at the wall like it might tell me what to do. My laptop sat on the coffee table, screen still open from earlier. I walked toward it slowly, almost on autopilot, like my body knew what needed to happen before my mind did. I sat down, opened a blank document, and typed 2 words: "Dear Miles." The rest came out fast, not angry, not emotional, just quietly resolved, the way a structure gives way after too much weight for too long. I wrote that I was resigning effective 2 weeks from today. I thanked him for the opportunity, even though the word tasted bitter. I wished the team well. I kept it clean, professional, polite, the kind of letter you write when you're walking away from 7 years of your life. When I finished, I read it twice, not to edit it, but because part of me couldn't believe I'd actually written it. Then I printed it, set the page gently on my dining table, and felt a strange calm settle over me. I realized I wasn't shaking, I wasn't crying, I wasn't afraid. I was done. And that was enough. I fell asleep faster than I had in months, the letter resting on my nightstand like a quiet promise. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, 15 minutes ahead of time, as always. Not for them, but for me. Habit, I guess. I walked past the break room where 2 analysts pretended not to stare, past the cubicles where people whispered the moment they thought I couldn't hear. I walked straight to Miles's office door, already open, and found him on a call, pacing and gesturing like he was delivering a TED Talk instead of explaining why he'd lost track of a client contract. He saw me, lifted one finger and mouthed, "1 second," like I was interrupting his brilliance. That tiny gesture, the finger, the dismissiveness, snapped the last thread holding the old version of me in place. When he finally hung up, he pointed at the chair. "What do you need, Hannah? I'm swamped." I didn't sit. I stepped forward, placed the resignation letter in the center of his desk, and waited. It took a moment for it to register. His smirk faded, his eyebrows twitched, his expression rearranging into something sour. "What is this?" he asked, tightly. "My resignation," I said calmly, "effective 2 weeks from today." He blinked. "You're quitting?" "Yes, because of the restructuring, among other things." He leaned back with a scoff. "You're being dramatic. This makes you look weak, running because you didn't get your way." I met his eyes without flinching. "I'm not running, Miles. I'm leaving. There's a difference." He opened his mouth, probably reaching for something cutting he'd later call mentorship, but nothing came out. He just sat there, deflated. I turned toward the door. I'll finish my 2 weeks professionally. After that, I'm done. I didn't wait for permission or a reaction. I walked past the cubicles, past the whispers, past the people suddenly very focused on their keyboards. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from release, like my body finally realized the cage door was open. By lunchtime, half the office knew. Some avoided me, some looked at me with envy. A few, like Elise, pulled me aside and whispered, "Are you really leaving?" I didn't explain. I didn't brag. I just said it was time. And for once, those words felt true. My last day came with no cake, no card, no awkward group photo, just silence. Fitting. I felt no sentiment. I packed slowly because I wanted to feel every second of leaving. Walking out of that building felt like stepping out of a storm I hadn't realized I'd been living in for years. The next Monday, I walked into Northbridge, and if my old office felt like a cage, this place felt like oxygen. Glass walls, warm light, a real desk, and a team that actually looked up when I entered. Serena met me with 2 coffees. "First day," she said. "Let's get you set up." No checklist shoved at me, no expectation to clean up a mess before proving myself. She introduced me to the team one by one, every interaction grounded and respectful. By the end of the week, I was already reviewing 2 major accounts my old company had clearly mishandled. On my first client call, the representative, Mara, leaned closer to her camera. "Wait," she said, "you're with Northbridge now?" "Yes," I replied. "Good to see you again." Her shoulders dropped in visible relief. "Thank God," Mara said. "I've been trying to get answers from your old team for weeks. Nothing but delays and excuses." Serena shot me a knowing look, but stayed silent as Mara walked us through missed shipments, missed deadlines, invoices sent twice or not at all. Every problem I used to prevent before they ever reached a client. I guided her through a solution step by step, and by the end of the call, she signed a contract with Northbridge, not because I pushed, but because she trusted me. That was how it began. Slowly at first. A few messages from former clients, a referral here, a quiet inquiry there. Someone from a mid-sized distribution firm emailed, "Heard through the grapevine you made a move. Smart." Another message followed. "Hope you're still in operations. Our team could use someone who actually listens." None of it felt like revenge. It felt like gravity. People are drawn to stability, and I'd been that stability for years, while Miles pretended to be the architect behind it all. Without me, the cracks showed faster than I expected. One afternoon, after lunch, my phone rang. Jonah, one of the few decent people left at my old office, his voice sounded strained, like he was calling from inside a collapsing building. "Hannah, it's bad." "What happened?" "Everything. 3 people quit last week, 2 more this morning. Tyler screwed up a vendor contract so badly the entire Midwest supply line is frozen. Customers are furious. Miles spent an hour yelling about sabotage." "Sabotage?" Jonah let out a hollow laugh. "He thinks you orchestrated it." I let the silence sit. I trained Tyler for 1 afternoon, and Jonah, that's the last thing I did for that company. "I know," he sighed, "but he's unraveling. No direction, no answers, just chaos." I expected to feel triumphant, like this was poetic justice, but instead I felt something quieter. Confirmation. I hadn't imagined the weight I carried. I hadn't exaggerated the dysfunction. I hadn't been dramatic or sensitive. I'd been right. A week later, Elise called. No small talk. "I'm leaving," she whispered. "I can't work under someone who screams at everyone and then hides in his office." I didn't tell her what to do. I just said, "You deserve better." She cried soft, exhausted tears, because sometimes permission is all people need. Meanwhile, Northbridge grew. 2 new coordinators, another analytics lead. Serena pulled me into every strategic meeting like I belonged there. And for the first time, I did. Every client I onboarded felt like a door opening. every problem I solved felt like reclaiming something I'd lost long before Miles ever slid that folder across his desk. I didn't need to watch his world collapse to feel vindicated. I just needed to stand somewhere I was finally seen. The collapse was happening without me. The rise, that part, I had earned. I didn't expect to see Miles again, not so soon, and definitely not at one of those overpriced industry mixers where everyone pretends they aren't silently judging each other. Serena and I had just finished a pitch when I spotted him across the room. He looked smaller, shoulders hunched, eyes sunken, his suit hanging like it belonged to someone else. The man who once strutted through hallways as if the world owed him applause now looked like he was barely holding himself together. The moment he saw me, something in him snapped. He cut through a cluster of executives mid-conversation, practically stumbling toward me. "Hannah," he hissed, breath sharp, "we need to talk." "No," I said quietly, "we don't." His face twisted. "You think this is funny? You think you won?" The desperation in his voice was louder than his words. I kept mine calm. This was never a game. "You destroyed my company," he snapped, loud enough to silence half the room. Conversation stalled. Eyes turned. For a moment, the entire mixer seemed to hold its breath. I tilted my head. "I didn't destroy anything, Miles. I just stopped holding everything together." The hush that followed felt like a door closing. He stared at me, fury draining into something hollow, something defeated. When he finally stepped back, it wasn't because he wanted to. It was because he had nothing left to fight with. Serena touched my arm gently. "You ready to go?" I nodded, more than ready. By the end of that quarter, Northbridge had doubled its growth. Serena offered me equal partnership. My name went on the letterhead next to hers, and somewhere in the background of my life, Miles's world kept collapsing without me lifting a single finger. Legacy isn't about who shouts the loudest when they're on top. It's about who's still standing when the noise fades. And I am still standing. Looking back, what stands out isn't the collapse of Miles's company. It's how long I stayed somewhere that refused to see me. My biggest lesson wasn't about revenge, it was about recognition. I spent years telling myself loyalty mattered more than respect, that patience would be rewarded, that being dependable was enough. But the truth I finally faced was this: you can't save a place determined to ignore the hands holding it up. I learned that walking away doesn't make you weak, it frees you to rise. And not every battle needs a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave quietly and let people live with the consequences they created. People like Miles don't collapse because you push them. They collapse because the scaffolding they built on other people's labor was never strong. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. I don't hate him. I don't need to. Life handled what I never had to touch. What matters now is what I built afterward. The peace, the confidence, the validation that came not from revenge, but from finally choosing myself. For anyone living something similar right now, here's what I want you to know. You don't owe lifelong loyalty to places that treat you as replaceable. You don't need permission to leave environments that shrink you. You're not dramatic for expecting respect. You're human. Today's workplaces move fast, change fast, and sometimes break people in the process. Your responsibility is not to keep them running at the cost of your sanity. Your responsibility is to protect the parts of yourself that make you valuable, your clarity, your strength, your voice. How to get started today? Write down 3 things you bring to your job that no one sees. Identify one boundary you've been afraid to set, and practice saying it out loud. Reach out to someone who values your work. Connection can be a lifeline. Start updating your resume even if you're not ready to move yet. If this story speaks to what you're going through, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you want more stories like this, share, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.